Hello everyone and welcome! Today I'm hoping to answer a very frequently asked question that I've received over the years, and I'm hoping I can share some thoughts and information that all you builders out there will find useful. But the question is in regards to whether or not diecast metal bodies can be used with our 1/24th and 1/25th scale RC chassis designs, as well as other more conventional RC platforms available on the market. Essentially, rather than utilizing an unassembled plastic model kit for these smaller scale projects, instead use one of the many diecast options available in the same size. And really my answer is basically something along the lines of can you, sure, should you, maybe not. Obviously a lot is going to depend on your specific project and what kind of performance you're wanting to achieve, and also what chassis you're using. But as far as mounting a diecast body on top of one of these smaller scale chassis that we sell or offer STL files for on our Patreon, I always recommend not using diecast metal bodies and instead only recommend using lightweight bodies such as those from a plastic model kit. The main reason for this is obviously the substantial difference in weight. For example, this here is the 69 Charger body that I showcased the build process of recently here on the channel. Putting that on the scale, we get a weight of about 2.5 ounces. If we compare that to this diecast metal body of a 1970 Challenger, the weight of this body is about 12.5 ounces. While that might not seem like a huge difference when you're just holding them in your hand, in the context of a smaller scale RC vehicle, which keep in mind the entire finished car might weigh less than just that diecast body alone, that definitely does make a difference. What you're probably going to get as a result is the RC chassis and electronics will have to work much harder to support the weight and get the car moving. Naturally, you're going to need stronger electronics, stronger drivetrain and suspension parts, and just an all-around more robust platform that may be beyond what these smaller DIY 3D printable components are able to handle, again like the ones that we have available for download. In many situations, it's just going to be kind of hard to justify all that extra weight. For example, if I want to build a car like this 69 Chevelle, where I don't really care that much about performance, but I instead really want to emphasize the lifelike realism, I'm going to want some of the smallest size drivetrain, suspension, and electronic components as possible. The bigger these components, the harder they're going to be to hide in the case of the electronics, or make look proportional to the rest of the car in the case of the functional drivetrain and suspension parts. That's kind of defeating the whole purpose of trying to make the vehicle as lifelike as possible. But then on the other end of the spectrum, if we want to go for maximum performance, whether that be high-flying bashing or a comp-ready crawler or drift car, a heavy body isn't really going to help in the performance department either. This isn't to say that using a diecast body is impossible. In fact, I believe there are some ready-to-run diecast-bodied RC vehicles available on the market. I just don't think you're often going to really find it much of a benefit, whether you're going for maximum lifelike realism or all-out performance. But if you're willing to make that compromise, you're probably going to want to beef up whatever RC chassis you're using to make sure it can handle the extra weight. Now, if this is a project that's maybe going to get driven once or twice and spend most of its life on the shelf, this is probably less critical, but if this is something you're really going to get out there and drive and put some actual miles on the odometer, you're probably going to need to beef up the chassis. It of course depends on the type of vehicle, but this could include everything from the drivetrain, electronics, shocks, and body mounts, unless you're choosing an RC platform that is really overbuilt right out of the box and can handle all that extra weight without things wearing out or breaking prematurely. Particularly when you're talking about crawlers or off-road 4x4s, there are some extremely heavy rigs out there, though every one that I've seen has always been very well thought out, with the appropriate gearing, high-strength servos, sometimes even custom fabricated high-strength metal components. In the context of a super scale trail truck like the ones that you're seeing here, a super heavy truck can make the driving experience more challenging, and at the same time more lifelike and enjoyable if you're up for the challenge. But you generally can't just double, triple, quadruple the weight of any bone stock RC platform and not expect there to be some changes in not only how it drives, but also the longevity of some of the components. But hopefully that type of thing goes without saying. But getting a bit more specific here to these smaller scale projects I like to showcase a lot here on the channel, the only real advantage I would see to using a diecast body over a plastic model kit is that the diecast cars generally come pre-painted and fully detailed, eliminating the need to do any of that work yourself. I suppose there's also some potential to make the performance more lifelike, with a heavier body leaning more in the turns and making off-road driving seem a bit more realistic. But again, you're really going to have to beef up the RC platform for what may amount to an almost imperceivable difference in driving. These tiny 3D printable parts work great when installed on a lightweight vehicle, though even then they can still be a little bit on the sketchy side in terms of durability. However, 3D printed plastic may prove to be insufficient for vehicles over a certain weight, especially if we're really going to get out there and put some miles on them, and not just have it be more of a slow-rolling showpiece. I could certainly see it as being a fun challenge, but for the most part, personally, I would rather just stick to plastic. Also, I just really enjoy the process of building a plastic model kit, picking out the color that I want to paint it, sometimes doing some custom modifications, and of course working with plastic is very easy when you need to do some things like modify the body to fit over top of an RC chassis. I suppose for some hobbyists who don't want to have to do any paint work or assembly on the body, choosing a diecast car would be a good solution, but I feel like in some ways, for at least me personally, it would be like buying a pre-assembled Lego set. Like, I don't really see that as being a convenience, I see it as bypassing a lot of the joy and challenge of a project. And I feel like for a lot of the hobbyists who don't want to have to do any painting or assembly work, there are just so many great looking and very lifelike ready to run RC models out there. Everything from some of the great FMS products that I've showcased previously here on the channel, as well as the phenomenal selection offered by Kyosho for their Mini Z platforms, it really seems like some of these products could be a great alternative to utilizing a heavier diecast body on a conventional RC platform. If you want something that both looks good and will perform well going around a track or off-road, there's certainly some great ready-to-run options out there that will not only be well-functioning RC vehicles, but also shelf-worthy models right out of the box. It is probably worth pointing out that at a certain point, when you're building an even smaller scale vehicle, like something more the size of a Hot Wheels car, the fact that the body is die-cast really won't be an issue. There are a ton of great Hot Wheels to RC conversions out there, and the relative size of them to the electronics I've seen people use for these projects are more than capable of propelling these tiny vehicles. I could definitely see myself attempting a project more in that size using a die-cast body, but when it comes to some of these, at least comparatively larger size vehicles, that's when the weight could start to become more of an issue, and you're definitely going to need some beefier electronics to move the vehicle down the road. But those are just some of my thoughts and sort of a response to the question of can you use die-cast bodies with these smaller size 3D printable RC chassis, and also why personally I tend to stick with plastic bodies. It's certainly possible and something I might try out in the future, but for the reasons I just mentioned, it may not necessarily be the best choice depending on the expectations you have for your project. But for all who've asked, I hope you found today's video informative. For those who have done a project using a die-cast body, feel free to share some of your experiences as far as the performance and what parts and chassis you used. Of course, as always, a huge thanks to all of our channel members and Patreon supporters for helping to make these videos possible. If you're interested in one of these 3D printable chassis designs, you'll find more information and STL files over on our Patreon. That's all I've got for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.